Good morning. Is that coming through at the back there? Yeah. That's great. My name's Ben Griffin. I served in the British Army from 1997 until 2005. Served in the Parachute Regiment and the Special Air Service. I deployed on operations in Northern Ireland 3 times, the former Yugoslavia, Afghanistan and Iraq. I'm now the National Coordinator of Veterans for Peace UK. We are an ex-services organisation of men and women who have served this country or the United Kingdom in every conflict since the Second World War. Our eldest member, or some of our oldest members, one of them, Jim Radford, was at D-Day. Norman Scarth was on the Arctic convoys. So our oldest members served during the Second World War, and our youngest members have just got back from Afghanistan. And through our membership, we cover pretty much every conflict that the United Kingdom has fought since the Second World War, and there are a lot of them. Our organisation actually began in 1985 in the United States of America, where 5 veterans gathered together over a series of months and came up with a statement of purpose that we still use today. And I suppose one of the fundamental lines of that statement of purpose is, we as veterans of the armed forces do hereby, I've forgotten it now. Well, having dutifully served our nation, do recognise our greater obligation to serve the cause of world peace. And that's what drives our organisation. That's what started it off in 1985, and it still drives us now. And I think what makes us a bit different from other organisations in the peace movement is the fundamental drive behind most members within Veterans for Peace is not an ideological one. It's not because we're Marxists. It's not because we're Christian pacifists. It's not because we're anarchists. It's our opposition to war is a result of our direct experience. And that's what differentiates us from other organisations. Within our membership, we have got Christian pacifists, we have got Marxists, we've got conservative voters, Labour voters, we've got a wide range of the political spectrum and a wide range of the religious and the non-religious. I just want to quickly talk about my own experience, what led me into Veterans for Peace. I was a career soldier. I'd been serving in the military for 8 years when I deployed to Iraq. Most British troops were serving down in Basra, and I was deployed to Baghdad to serve within an American unit. And our job in Iraq was to capture high-value targets. And if you read the story, the official story, the language that they would use would conceal the true nature of what we were doing. They would talk about hunting down dangerous terrorists and capturing them. But actually, thinking back to it, and to put it into plain English, our job in Iraq was to attack families in their homes at night. We would be given names and addresses of men, and we would go out under the curfew and sneak up to their homes, place huge amount of explosives on the front door, on the wall, and use those explosives to make entry into the building. Once inside, we would quickly take over the building. We would drag people out of their beds. We would separate the women and the children from the men, hold them at gunpoint, holding children at gunpoint in their own homes, in their bedclothes. And then we would interrogate the men. And whilst this was going on, we would ransack the houses. We would take everything: bank statements, passports, money, mobile phones, computers, anything that we thought was of any intelligence value. And this would probably take, I don't know, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, maybe less. And then we'd put all of these people's possessions into huge mail sacks, tie them off, and then we would tie up the men. We would bind the men with cable ties and put a hood over their head, and then take them back with us to our base in the Green Zone. Those men would then be handed over and tortured in American prisons that have been called black sites, basically prisons that the Red Cross did not have access to. And that's what we were involved in Iraq. And you might be sat there thinking, oh, well, you were after dangerous terrorists. But actually only 5% of the men that we captured out there had anything to do with the insurgency. So all those homes that we raided, all those people that we terrified, all the children that we, terrified, was to catch, out of 100, 5 of them would have been insurgents. And I started to think when I was out there, this is making things worse. This isn't making things better. We're creating a bigger problem. All of those homes we went into, what did those 14, 15-year-old boys in those homes go out and do after we'd left? What did their neighbours think about us after we'd left? And I came to the opinion that we were actually fueling the insurgency and that we were making a problem in Iraq bigger than it should have been. But I suppose the lasting memory I have from Iraq is of the children. Going into those homes at night, the look on those children's faces. They couldn't speak English, I couldn't speak Arabic, but the look said everything, and the look was, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? And the look on those children's faces has stayed with me. Most members of Veterans of Peace have got experiences, not the same as mine, but experiences in other conflicts. And those experiences really do vary considerably from the official narratives. When I got back from Iraq, it was one of the things that made me most angry was that the media reporting, the political statements, the statements coming out in the Ministry of Defence bear no resemblance to my own experience in Iraq. So, one of the key roles that Veterans of Peace carries out is to increase the public awareness of the costs of war. We firmly believe that unless the public truly understands the nature of warfare, what actually happens in 21st century warfare, they are less likely to oppose it. If we allow the state and the media and the Ministry of Defence to define the narrative around warfare, then it will continue. And so we take great effort in increasing the public awareness of the cost of war. It's what we call our bread and butter work. Every member of Veterans of Peace should be able to do that on a day-to-day basis. Our national projects always have an element of that within it. And so it's something we do on a day-to-day basis, whether it's giving a lecture here, going into a school, or creating a national project. This was a project that we ran in 2015 in cooperation with an artist called Darren Cullen. You might be aware of the Action Man toys you might have played with as a child. And the artist Darren Cullen recognised that these toys didn't really depict the true nature of warfare. Action Man always had a clean uniform, he never got injured. And so he created these 3 toys, PTSD Action Man, Paralysed Action Man and Dead Action Man. And then we went on to create 3 satirical adverts which showed these different action men in their sort of in their lived experience. And you can go on our website and find the link to that video. I'm not going to show the video here today. It lasts about 6 minutes, but we haven't got time. And so this was an attempt to break through into the public mindset and try and, show the other side, the consequences of warfare. In this case, for veterans and for soldiers. But part of our work in increasing the cost of war also involves, the costs, the human cost in terms of the people who live in the countries that we invade, whether that's Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya. The environmental costs, the huge damage to the environment that's caused by warfare. The economic costs. So that's work that we carry out on a day-to-day basis, and it's something that we think that unless we do that on a day-to-day basis, the public are less likely to get on board with our other activities. So I'm just going to go back there. So another key clause in our statement of purpose is that we will work to restrict our government from intervening overtly and covertly in the internal affairs of other nations. Now that's the tricky one. That's what people have been trying to do for, for a century, going back to the start of the First World War. And how do we do that? And that's something we're still working on. But what we have done is, as an organisation, we've identified 2 possible strategies to restrict our government. And this is UK-based. It might be different if you're from another country. These strategies might not be relevant to you. But the 2 strategies that we've identified, one would be through non-participation. So through increasing the public awareness of the costs of war and building a true anti-war sentiment amongst the population, we get to the point where we can encourage enough of the population not to participate, not just in the military, but in military, industries that are attached to the military, industries that the military depends on in order to carry out their actions. So that's one route, the non-participation route. And the other route that we've identified is through the political system as it stands now. And that would be through gaining some sort of democratic control over our foreign policy. And there has been a change in the UK over the last 2 years that we think has possibly enabled this route. And it might not be a popular change amongst people in this room. But the vote to leave the European Union was the first time, I believe, in British history where the public, the general population, were given a say over British foreign policy. You might not like the outcome, but that's an incredible thing to have happened in our country, that a vote was given to the people to decide an element of foreign policy. And I'm going to talk about it later, but we're looking to initiate a campaign later on this year which will work within that strategy of trying to gain a democratic control over the foreign policy of the United Kingdom. Another key clause in our statement of purpose is to end the arms race and reduce and eventually eliminate nuclear weapons. And as an organisation, we've recognised that actually there are two bigger, longer-standing organisations within the United Kingdom that are already doing this work. Campaign Against the Arms Trade in terms of the arms race, and Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, CND, which are involved in the elimination of nuclear weapons. And so as an organisation, we don't actually come up with our own strategies, our own programmes in terms of those issues. What we do is we take the lead from Campaign Against the Arms Trade and CND and join in where we can. And tomorrow will be definitely the largest arms fair in the UK, probably in Europe, is being set up this week in the Excel Centre in London, the DSEI Arms Fair. And so we'll be going along there tomorrow, Veterans for Peace, and we'll be running a vehicle checkpoint. I don't know, anyone serving Northern Ireland in the audience? Well, it was a kind of routine operation that we used to pull in Northern Ireland all the time. We would block a road and check all the vehicles coming in and out of a certain area, and we would be checking for illegal weapons and explosives. So tomorrow we'll be at the DSEI Arms Fair with a vehicle checkpoint set up on one of the main routes in, and we'll be attempting to inspect those vehicles for weapons that contravene the Geneva Conventions and other treaties that Britain has signed up to. And, you know, we firmly believe that the law would be on our side in terms of this, and we hope that the police turn up and assist us or even relieve us from that duty. And we'll be making a film about that, so you'll be able to see that. So our main event of the year in terms of a national gathering is we gather in London in November on the weekend of Remembrance Sunday. And that's when we have our annual general meeting. But it's also on Remembrance Sunday when we walk, not march, we walk to the cenotaph under the banner of Never Again, which you can see there. And we do this immediately after the state ceremony, you know, where the royal family are there and the politicians, and they all lay their red poppies. And we walk down there immediately afterwards under this banner. And we believe that this is the original sentiment of Armistice Day, the original sentiment of Remembrance Sunday, never again. You know, the horror of that First World War was recognised widely within society because every family had been affected by it. And, you know, I'm not sure when this did change, but obviously over time it has changed, and it's become less about never again and more about a kind of commemoration of the bravery of our soldiers or the righteousness of our cause. And so we walk to the cenotaph under this banner, and we lay the only wreath of white poppies at the cenotaph. Now, that wreath of white poppies can be misunderstood. You know, people call it the pacifist wreath or the peace wreath, but it's actually, as far as I'm concerned, it has one particular purpose. The red poppies commemorate British and Commonwealth dead, full stop. The white poppy commemorates or remembers all of those killed in war. So that includes the British and Commonwealth dead. It also includes the German, Japanese dead. It includes all the millions and millions of civilians who were killed in the First and Second World War and have been killed since. And so it's a much wider act of remembrance than this red poppy. I'm not particularly against people wearing the red poppy, but I think the white poppy represents a much more wide-ranging appreciation of the true devastation of warfare. And we invite anyone to follow us. You might be able to see in the background there, just behind our Veterans for Peace banner, there's a group of people there. We invite people to come along and take part in that ceremony, to follow us down to the cenotaph and to stand with us as we lay that wreath and we sing a song and read a poem and play the last post. To come along and, if you're able to get to London for Remembrance Sunday, we would urge you to come along and support this. I think it's really important that there's a different act of remembrance that goes on at the cenotaph, the centre of British imperial power during that weekend. So, going back to what I see as the fundamental clause of the Veterans for Peace Statement of Purpose, we will restrict our government from intervening overtly and covertly in the internal affairs of other nations. Now, from a UK perspective, this is the most important clause in the Statement of Purpose because the United Kingdom is one of the most militarily aggressive countries in the world today, and historically probably the most aggressive country that has ever existed. I often put a map of the world up covered in pink, and people go, oh, is that the empire, the former empire? I go, no, that's every country that Britain has ever invaded. We've invaded every country in the world bar 22. And some of those 22 are the Vatican and Monaco. Another one is Bolivia. It's pretty hard to get to. We're a kind of naval country. So we've got a problem here, and if we are to truly serve the cause of world peace, I think the most vital thing that we can do is to restrict our government. And how are we going to do that? Well, we've tried all sorts of different things, or explored different avenues, and we firmly believe that that we want to launch this campaign that will seek to gain some sort of democratic control over our foreign policy. And what we're looking for is not to stop a particular war. In the run-up to Iraq, there was a huge march, 2 million people. And then a few years later, we invaded Helmand province. There was resistance to the war in Afghanistan, and a few years later, we invaded and attacked Libya. What we're looking to do is create a fundamental, permanent change. Not just opposing this war or that war, but a fundamental change. So we're looking to initiate this long-term campaign to make the United Kingdom into a permanently neutral country. People might be aware of that concept. It's formalised in The Hague, I think the Hague Conventions, and there are several countries around the world who have claimed this status. Switzerland probably being the most obvious example. Now, it is a bit ambiguous about, certain countries claim neutrality and they kind of define it for themselves. Part of what happens is you define what your neutrality is going to look like, and then the rest of the world says, well, hold on a minute, we want to say in this too. But we have identified these 5 conditions that we would like to see adopted by the United Kingdom. And we think that whilst maybe within the peace movement, this doesn't go far enough, we think in terms of speaking to ordinary people, in terms of speaking in words that people can understand, and in terms of taking a pragmatic step that is possible, that this is possible. So the first condition there, as a permanently neutral country, we will defend our territory against foreign attack. We won't allow foreign military within our territory. We will determine our own domestic and foreign policy. And then we get onto the key things. We will not attack other countries or enter into any war between other countries, and we will not make any commitment that may involve our country in a future war. And these are the 5 conditions that we're looking to push and to promote amongst the general population. We've done some gathering some initial feedback, and we found that this idea is actually popular across the political spectrum. There are people on the right who support this idea. There are people on the left. There are centrists who support this idea. This is what we're looking to initiate in 2017, and we're looking to do a big public launch in 2018 on the 100th anniversary of the end of the First World War, where we'll be saying, look, in 1918, most of the British public said this is something we should never do again. 100 years later, we fought all of these wars. It's not working. The key thing we say in Veterans for Peace in the UK is war is not the solution to the problems we face in the 21st century. I'm not going to argue about the Second World War, I'm not even going to argue about the Falklands, but in the 21st century, it is pretty obvious that this isn't working. And this we see as a way of solving that problem of the continuing wars that we fight. Thank you very much.